So first, Mr. Hamilton, would you just say your name for the record?
Brian Hamilton.
All right. And have you decided whether you would prefer to give an opening statement or a closing statement?
Madam Chair, I'll defer to the end.
All right, sounds good. We'll save it for the end. So Counselor McClinton is going to kick us off with the first questions for you.
Okay.
Mr. Hamilton, thank you very much for applying. Appreciate that. Everybody's heard before, it's unpaid and it's a very thankless job. But the reason why Hoover City is a great city, got great schools. Again, good school board members is a big part of that. So got two questions I'm going to give you. It's probably already in the packet that you answered that Counselor Driver gave you. But the first one is about the desegregation order. I'd like to get your understanding of it, the 5 green factors, and what you think, since it's been a while, we've had this thing since the school district's been around, what can be done in your best understanding of how we can get out from that order?
Yeah, thank you, Counselor McClendon. So Stout versus Board of Education, initial complaints filed in 1965. The plaintiff filed on behalf of his daughter and other similarly Black children, centered in and around forced desegregation. And so from 65 to 2025, there have been a series of procedural activities, and now it sort of exists as a consent decree. Hoover is subject to that consent decree, subject to a ruling relative to systems who may have sort of broke away from Jefferson County, so we're still subject to it. So we're under federal sort of oversight, right? And it creates, my understanding is it creates operational, administrative stuff that we have to do, right, in order to get pre-approval and clearances from things from bus routes to schools to sort of you name it. And so, you know, it's a bit of an interesting exercise. How do you get to sort of that unitary status, right? I think we've done an excellent job of being thoughtful about the stakeholders in this community. But it is really a demonstration, and it's up to sort of the federal judge. And I think we've got to continue to be diligent. We've got to continue to listen. I think we got to continue to do what we've been doing in the past. But ultimately, we've got to continue to advocate about the good things that we're doing for all of our students.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure you're familiar with RC3.
Yes.
Been very successful. And some people ask, should we have another high school? Some people, like myself, think we should have another RC3 located someplace else. I mean, what are your thoughts about that? Another high school or another RC3 for workforce development? What do you think?
Yeah, Counselor McClendon, I think we've got to be very thoughtful in this economic times of uncertainty. I think one of the advantages that we've been able to do is we've been able to concentrate our resources and not spread them too thin, right? So you've got two things pulling against each other. You've got a increased demand for workforce opportunities, which is absolutely excellent and fabulous. But we also have decreased resources. We have economic uncertainty. You know, a lot of our funding will be coming from the Education Trust Fund. The economy, you know, a lot of that's sales tax and some other things. And so we've got to be able to plan appropriately so it is sustainable and make sure that we rationalize the model. Even though the demand is there, I think we've got to think long term, and it remains to be seen whether or not we can support it in this economic uncertain times.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Hamilton. Just two quick questions. What do you believe to be the roles of a school board member?
Thank you, Counselor. The roles of a school board member are to support, supervise the superintendent, right? We're there to make sure from a policy standpoint that the resources are there. We act on recommendations from the superintendent. We continue to advocate from our funding sources, make sure that, you know, the capital assets are in place, like buildings, in order to support our curriculum, and making sure that curriculum and instruction is in place at the direction of the superintendent.
Thank you. Last one. What do you feel is the most important issue facing our school district? And how would you address that issue?
Yeah, I think one of the things that are excellent about Hoover City Schools is, I'll just pick one, is the student-teacher ratio. In order for us to do that, we get allocations for funded units, but my understanding of the system is that we use a lot of local funding to maintain those ratios. Again, there's demand for families who want to move to Hoover to take advantage of good public schools. So we've got to be thoughtful about, as demand increases, and again, we get pressure on the budget, we need to be mindful of trade-offs, and we need to be thinking about other ways to raise local funds. Very grateful for the support from the city and the council of the $5 million on an annual basis. We've got to maintain that that's there. We have a foundation. We've got to continue to support that, and we've got to continue to grow corporate and philanthropic relationships.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Counselor Sweeney. Counselor Murphy?
Yes, so 2 questions for me. What are your thoughts or views on regulating books or learning material into our K-12 libraries?
Yeah, it's a hot topic, right? And I think what we got to do is, again, we've got to follow the lead of the professionals. We have hired professionals, the superintendent, his staff, and our thoughts, my thoughts are to listen to the superintendent and respond based on my life experiences as a parent, as a business person. But at the end of the day, policy positions will be made based on a recommendation of the educational professionals.
And last one, what are your views on the elimination of the U.S. Department of Education?
I think it goes back to the economic uncertainty, right? And it's a little bit indirect. So let's say that you put Pell Grants at risk for higher ed, right? You're putting increased demand on the Education Trust Fund that funds in Alabama K-12 and 2-year and 4-year institutions. So when you have uncertainty, it will create budget pressures. Now, that's one position. The second position is this. Nobody can educate your kids better than the folks that's closest to it, right? And so fundamentally, I believe that, those decisions about policy should be made here locally, particularly when you have the so-called unfunded mandates where you've got these federal stipulations, but we all have to figure out where to get the money from to do it.
All right. President Lyda?
Mr. Hamilton, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Glad you're here. Thank you so much for your interest and application. You have served on some very high-profile boards within Metro Birmingham. I'm an old Federal Reserve Bank employee, so
Okay.
thank you for your service on that board. But not only have you served, but you've chaired a lot of those boards. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, if you're appointed to this board, it'll be unlike any board you've served on previously. In the fact that you'll be serving the community, and the community will look at you, Mr. Hamilton, as their representative to the school system. With that will come them asking you to solve certain problems for them, problems that are very emotional, right? When you talk about the education of children, these can be very emotional for parents, and they will expect you to help them walk them through to a resolution. Talk to us about how you would do that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, first of all, I think it's important to acknowledge that whenever you're a part of a team, coalition building and making sure that you are engaged with stakeholders is going to be very, very important. At the end of the day, one individual school board member cannot do anything by themselves. The school board speaks with one voice. And even though it is challenging, there's nothing more, and I agree with you, there's nothing more precious than educating our children, and it is emotionally challenging. But I think what you have to do is, you got to be transparent, and then you have to honor your fiduciary obligations, right? You've got a duty of care and a duty of loyalty to the school board, acting with a reasonable person standard and making sure you're acting on factual information. It is tough, right? But the school board, the school system is the biggest, most important asset that we have in this community. And it's up to all of us to continue to maintain the stewardship of that asset. And that will be at times, communicating with folks about facts, things that you can share, things that you can't share. Oftentimes, it won't be things that people want to hear, but it will be the truth. And I think that is the way that we have sustained the school system up until now. And if we're going to continue to be resilient, that would be the attitude and approach I would take.
Right. How many Board of Education meetings here in the city of Hoover have you had a chance to attend?
I've attended one in person, and I've attended a lot of them virtually.
Heard that a lot this evening. It's great to have that option available. So you may have noticed in some of your observations that it's not always an environment without tension.
Sure.
How do you handle disagreement or criticism, especially in a public or emotionally charged setting?
Yeah, thank you for that, Madam Chair. I will tell you, very early on in my public service career, I was a member of the Birmingham Jefferson County Transit Authority, of which Hoover is a member of. And while it is not as charged as public education, it is, it is one of those things that people see transportation. They don't see people riding on the buses. They don't understand why you have to invest in it, and it can become a very controversial thing. But at the end of the day, you gotta be in the game, and there's no one going to help and support our community other than the folks that are here. It's just us, right? It's our turn to steward these assets. And so I'm not a stranger to controversy or conflict, but that's why I led with, it's all about coalition building, right? And you have to assume best intentions from folks, right? You don't presuppose what folks, what they're bringing to the table. You gotta take people as they come, build coalitions, and you build relationships one foxhole at a time, right? There are going to be some fights. There are going to be things we don't agree on, as it should be in a Jeffersonian democracy. This is how it works in America.
What would you do if your personal beliefs conflicted with the needs or values of the school system?
Yeah, I think I go back to the fiduciary duty of loyalty, duty of care. Ultimately, I can articulate my lived experiences, but serving in a fiduciary capacity, you have to make the decisions that are based on what's best for the school board.
Thank you very much. So we are ready to listen to your closing statement whenever you are ready.
All right, so I'll just say this. I appreciate what you all are doing, and thank you for your service, first of all. The second thing I will say is, the school system is a gem, and folks move to Hoover for the school system. My wife and I are no exception to that. But having a good school system isn't by happenstance. It has to be stewarded, it has to be tended to, and you gotta have good folks to continue to serve in a governance capacity. So that's why I'm here, because I don't take for granted that we'll always have a good school system without people serving in capacities like yourselves. And so this is the last thing I will say. When I have the opportunity to be on your side and I'm interviewing folks and there's a lot of good candidates to choose from, I always say, I don't take for granted that people want the job, but I always like to tell them to say it. So what I want you to know is I want to be on the team. I do. I want to be on the team. And I'm a team player. And so with that, I appreciate your time this evening and be happy to entertain any additional questions or observations you all may have subsequent to this meeting.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you and great job.
Thank you, ma'am.